Hi everybody, so we're going to get started with our last critique. It's hard to believe we're at the very end of class, but we are. So this is task 3, and I actually do have a few assignments in here from, I believe, task 2, just task 2, that we're going to take a look at. But we'll start with task 3, I think. Um, in any case, so just a couple of announcements here. So we are wrapping things up pretty quickly, and Wednesday is our final day of classes. So you want to make sure that you have everything submitted that you want to have submitted to the classroom by that point. As always, though, I do, if you don't have a chance for whatever reason to submit anything from task 5 into the final submissions area, I'll always use your tasks, to provide a grade based on that. So again, if you miss that final submission deadline, don't worry, we'll automatically use the task and use that to create that grade. Let's see, don't forget to take your final exam for milestone 5. Now just keep in mind I don't think anybody's taken it yet, and when you do take it, keep in mind that it is a final exam, it's not a practice exam. And the difference is that you only can take the exam one time. So if you want to go back and do any reviewing of the materials from the previous milestones in the terms of learning activities and such, feel free to do that before you take the exam. Okay, and Wednesday is the final day. I will most likely be posting final grades Thursday morning. So it's really important that, whatever you do want to submit, as I mentioned in the email I sent out on Friday or Saturday, you want to make sure to have everything submitted by the deadline that you want to be included in the final grades. Okay, I think that's it. So let's take a look at everybody's final project and see what we can talk about and what we can work on. Okay, Masa, let's see here. Yeah, you're drawing from, let's get it maybe a little bit bigger here if we can. From task 2, you had a lot of very good elements in your design, and I think you've done a good job here starting to sketch in, shade in your shading. So let's see, a few things here. So this is, okay, so your light source, if I remember, was from this window, which is what you started to use here, right? That's good. So I keep using that light source. And I would avoid using a secondary light source, like adding in one from here, because in reality, you would not see this type of lighting situation where you have a light coming from, this side and then a light coming from the back. I mean, you could have those types of lighting situations, but it would look quite different from what you have. They're complicated when you have two lighting situations. So I really recommend just sticking with one, and I would just stick with using this guy right here. So erase these ones here, and then just use this light source to cast your shadow. Okay. I think, again, you'll find it so much easier to work with. Then just keep working with adding more shadow. Think about like how to shade in like this element. What's going to happen with the light coming in? It's going to hit the top here, right? So this is going to be the lightest area, and then as we move around things, like for example, this is like a rounded element, it'll be light on top, it'll start getting darker as you move underneath. It'll be darker on this side and this side, So you can kind of just start playing with that. Watch with your shading. You really want to probably go a little slower with your shading. It looks a little rushed. And as I've probably mentioned in other group critiques, I just want to make it clear, there's nothing wrong in general in drawing with like really fast, sketchy, gestural types of shading. We do that in certain types of drawing classes and certain types of drawing. But in perspective, especially when you're getting started with perspective, it's really important, I think, to take it really slow and to use any one of the shading techniques from milestone 4 under the learning activities area. Just pick one that you want to work with. Like maybe it looks like you're aiming towards cross-hatching, so just really slowly work on cross-hatching. So what will happen is you get like multiple directions of your lines instead of like maybe like here you've got one way Here you've got a few, you're kind of going to have more of an even sense. Now you can, of course, mix different shading styles into one drawing, like stippling and cross-hatching, um, or scribbling, and combining it all together. And our online lecture talks a little bit about that, but I tend to think that it's better to stick with one, again, especially when you're starting out, because you really want to master one technique. And again, I recommend using a scrap piece of paper to really play with that, so that you can, fill in some squares or kind of create a simple box, on a scrap piece of paper, so you can just practice your shading and then take it into your drawing, because once you've spent so much time here creating your drawing, you really want your shading to be as good as it possibly can be. Okay, so that's what I would work on here. Now keep in mind, if the light source is here, it's probably going to get a little darker in here, isn't it? Let's just assume that these windows, it's darker over here, even though, or you could maybe keep them lighter, but kind of keep this in mind as your light source. And then so just keep working on that. And let's see, we're in Photoshop now. I'm just going to see if I can maybe, oh, I'll just adjust my lighting for my laptop. So keep in mind also the idea that about 10% of your drawing is going to be the blackest, darkest area, something similar to this. 10% of your drawing, 10% is going to be the white of your paper, and 80%, which is everything else, is going to be toned some shade of gray. It's like a standard, one of our sort of rules of thumb. So you probably need to do more shading here, adding more of the darks, and then adding more shading, which is fine. That's where you're at right now. I'm still a little concerned. I keep coming back to this oval here, this shape in here. It feels like it's not an oval yet. I think this is your line. So I would go back in here and just inscribe it. Go back to milestone 4. You remember that, of how to start inscribing your your oval, and like build it out again and redo that one, because I think that's an important element, to just get that oval really as nice and accurate as you possibly can. Okay, all right. Well, I like the shelves, the books that you have here in the bottle. Those are nice touches. Okay, so just keep working on it. Oh, and check out my feedback from the previous task. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but you want to make sure it looks like you're missing a scale figure as well, which I mentioned previously. Carol, I know what you mean about going darker. It's always been my struggle too. Yeah, and also your idea. I just wanted to comment on your idea of, let's see what you said here. To create a lonely yet peaceful environment, empty bar with a lone tender. Yeah, I love that idea. And I actually just kind of, it reminded me a bit what you said, with the work of the American artist Edward Hopper, which you may be familiar with his work. He's got some very famous paintings. Nighthawks is one of his most famous ones. I think that's maybe an example. It's actually a little better example down here. I don't, your particular drawing, it's not like it reminds me exactly of his style, but maybe even a little bit, but it's more just what your kind of idea behind it, which I think is very interesting, kind of a public space that's empty and kind of serene, which makes, such an interesting idea. Okay, so onto your drawing. Wow, yeah, you've done a really nice job here adding the shading, and this is such a lovely detail you added right here with the shadow of the bottle. I don't know how you captured that. Like, did you have a bottle that you looked at? It looks very accurate, with the kind of reflections and the lights and the darks. Um, and so let's see, your light source is the window, right? So I don't think there's much you need to add here. I would actually say maybe just continuing to add a little more darks, and just go very, very gently with adding more of the darks in here. Something to keep in mind is that this wall actually may in fact be a little bit darker. If this is where the light's coming from, you'll notice a lot of times that I'm looking around my room here. maybe no. Okay, I'm gonna say not. You can leave it this. I was sort of thinking, it does tend to get darker on the wall where the light source comes in, just because the wall is kind of coming through, like the rays of light are going outwards and lighting up the other surfaces, and so the wall doesn't tend to get the light, but sometimes it does reflect back. So you can sort of think about that and decide what you want to do. Maybe you could go a little tiny bit darker in here, a little bit darker on this side here, where the light is not hitting it. Very gently doing that. And kind of building a little bit more of those darks in there. What you'll notice is the more darks you add, the more you'll get more dimension, because the lights and the darks are what kind of create that modeling sense of like creating shapes, as you can see what's happening in yours. So that's all I've got. I think everything else looks really, really good, and you've done just a very nice job here at creating a very, sort of interesting and um, thoughtful scene in perspective. Okay, Patricia, so I'm just going to start with your um, task 2, which was the rough draft. Just because first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the light source. So actually, let's just open this up in Photoshop. Oh, here it is. So just like I mentioned previously with Masa, um, it's really best to work with one light source, especially because in your case, all of these light sources, you have them sort of affecting different parts. They would in fact be affecting every part of this design, all of them. So essentially you'd get a very indistinct shadow. You wouldn't get anything very crisp because of that. Like, if you have an environment you can go into that has a lighting source or multiple lighting sources, if you go walk around your wherever you are now and look around, you'll notice that we don't get those kind of crisp lights and darks with a lot of lighting. So what you want to do here is just assume that maybe one of these lights is turned on instead of all of them. And that way you'll have a lot easier time. You can use the method that we learned. Like, let's say you use this light up here, so you can just kind of draw uh, a line here. It's a little bit bigger. Um, you can just draw a shadow vanishing point and a light source from here and use that to create. So now we've got, your light source and your shadow vanishing point here, and you can use that to create all of your shadows in your design. Okay, so that's what I would do here. Um, so in terms of, let's see, I think this is your vanishing point right here. Yep, good. So I think overall it looks pretty accurate. It looks to me like your light sources, so I'm actually thinking that maybe you should just take out these light sources. There's a lot of problems with them in terms of like the creating a light source like we just talked about, but they're also not looking like they fit into the ceiling. They need to all be done, using the ellipse um, process that we, did back in Milestone 4, where you take these and you kind of create, you inscribe it. It takes quite a bit of effort to get those. I would say that's a lot of work for all of these. So why not just take that out? Maybe you could do something really simple up there, like a skylight, which is really a fun thing to do. You can just kind of, you could even make that your light source, but just a real simple square rectangular skylight if you want to have something up there, you know? So you could just kind of build that up in one point perspective. Um, and that way you have, and that you don't have to have anything at all in your ceiling, but that way, it seems like you want to have something up there. And so that way you'd have, something there that you could use as a light source that's easier to develop. So that's what I'd recommend here. You already have an ellipse here, so you've got your ellipse covered. You've got an ellipse here as well. Okay, so you've got a scale figure. Uh, And so this is the office, right? So yeah, I think this is developing. You know, you could even add a few more things here. Like I like the idea of just a picture on the wall. You could add a frame around it. Maybe you could add another kind of couple pictures here. Pictures are always awesome to add because they're, you know, they're rectangular, and you can just put them in. And you know, here you go. You could add another one right here, make it bigger and smaller, whatever you want to do. Okay, let's look at your next one, task 3. Yeah, so in this one, yeah, this is so you know, this is what, you know, kind of what's happened here is that you don't really have a specific light source. So hopefully our discussion before is going to help you create a better light source. Now, if you don't want to use a skylight, that's fine. Maybe have like a standing lamp somewhere. Standing lamps are often much easier to work with, like we did back in Milestone 4. So maybe you could add, you know, a standing lamp here somewhere right here. You could just build it out there and then use that to start casting your shadows as per Milestone 4. So think about that. Really think about your, I would just go work on your ceiling, maybe add a few things on the walls, and then go back and think about, where you want that light source and start developing your shading as per that light source. I think once you identify the light source, like where you want it to be, you will find that things start falling into place a lot better. And then, just watch, it looks like you start shading things in. You want to just avoid like shading in just entire planes, like entire things. You want to kind of keep thinking about the light source. Like if the light source is coming from here, for example, wherever you develop it, one side of this little stool is going to be a little lighter and then it's going to get darker as you move around. So you're going to notice things. Same with this guy. One side's going to be a little lighter, one side's going to be a little darker. It's all going to start kind of being built up based on that. Okay, I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Hey, Jesus, yeah, I love the imagination that you have in yours with the hand coming out. That's really interesting. And your staircase as well. I like it sort of a little bit wonky, kind of deliberately wonky and not quite, uh, you know, building grade, you could say. My husband, he would know the right term for that, because he's in that trade. Uh, and you started adding some light and shadow, which is great. So one thing that I'm having some trouble with is where your light source is. Is this going to be your light source? This looks like hey, we just talked about this. The skylight, is that where it is? If so, then, but also I see the shade kind of coming from the character from behind me. So it's a little bit confusing. Now you want to have your light source somewhere somewhere in here. And I think that probably you could you should add one at this point, and then use it to make sure that like how you're going to shade your stairs. So think about that. Where is your light source going to be? There's a lot of different possibilities. I always like to choose light sources based on where it's easiest to start casting shadows. So you could think about that. And then you're going to just set it up, So like maybe you could have a little, like a lamp here. You could do something right here and, put a lamp somewhere here. I'm drawing the whole thing, like I'm drawing the line to represent the light source here and then the shadow vanishing point here. That way you can cast it across and start thinking about where that light source will be. So something else I would do here too is I would, you've got a lot of space here that's like empty, what I would call empty space, like areas that you could easily develop. I love the rooms, what's happening back here. I think that's really cool. But maybe think about adding in a few elements here that would fit in with your concept, whatever that might be. I always like to just, suggest simple geometric elements that you could sort of, and that way you could also maybe run into, I'm just going to draw a line here of maybe on the floor, and then you could start maybe like you could put a little kind of table or square here, bring it up from the footprint. Maybe you could have another one, further back, just little cubes that you could, box in and that way too, much easier to cast and show a nice shadow from a simple object in the middle of the room. So, think about that. What else you could add here to just, bring it to life. So I think you're at a good stage at this point. And again, just keep working. Think about your light source, and then start moving from line work into lights and darks, like you started to do back here. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions.